out how do I turn my video on?
It should just be. I'll click Ask to start video. There you go. You're
I
on.
found it.
Yep, perfect. I'm also going to paste the other round of today's. A few of you have been through these, but I'll do another round of both the video and the Zoom one. I'm trying to be nimble, so as we go along, I will try to add trainings or remove trainings just depending on what people are interested in. It's always hard to say because everyone's doing different things. We all teach different disciplines. For some reason, I can't paste it in there. Huh. My copy and paste is not working today. That is really strange. There's no reason for that. Okay. Things are not working. Well, I'll try one more time. If that doesn't work, then I did send out an email, so that would also would work probably. Yeah, it's not letting me paste. I have no idea. Okay. All right, I'll just do some housekeeping. I'm just trying to see who's here, just to keep track, just kind of our numbers and so forth. There is also, just for those of you interested, there's a series on the LTCC webpage. If you go to the virtual campus, you'll see there's a series of options to sign up for Canvas classes there as well. That would be more like asking questions and things of that nature. If you're trying to find more of my trainings, now let me just close a few more windows here. We've been kind of...
It's called Virtual Campus.
Yeah, let me just show you that. It's easy to take a look at. So I'll just show you. If you go to ltcc.edu, it's our main, and it's right there. So it's like the new link that Katie Bailey, our marketing guru, added. So if you click on that, it has information about faculty support. Some of this is under development. Most of it you have. It's email addresses and how to log into Canvas. But under faculty support, I think the idea will be we'll build up more of this. And I noticed that Katie has in here under online trainings mentioning some of the trainings that I've been doing. They're not up there yet, so I've just been using email. But let me show you. If you go to my website, ltccteachingandlearning.com, one word. Just click on the COVID-19 and that will have updated resources as well. A lot of the topics we're covering in Canvas over the last couple weeks, like you want to learn more about the inbox, more videos on that, plagiarism, assignments and grading, which is one of the topics today. So there's a lot of information out there. And what I'm recommending to all of you, and I would be included in this certainly, is to just think about resources and opportunities for your students or for your staff that make the most sense to you. I read an article today, I want to say it was maybe even Harvard, where they were saying that they're moving a lot of their courses for spring to pass no fail or pass no pass, which I think typically they don't get transcripted, so I don't know how that could even work for students. The argument being made was that students need flexibility, but I think, even though we're living in the times of this global pandemic, we do still need to think about having standards and having assignments that do still teach to the Title V outline and the content we're required to teach. So it's always a hard situation. I remember after 9/11, the same thing, where a lot of people didn't even really want to teach, and I remember my first class after 9/11, spending just almost that first class just kind of connecting with students and allowing them to talk through some issues because it was so horrific dealing with that climate after 9/11. And this is similar, but it's been more of a steady drip, where it's like over time the cases increase and the closures continue and so forth. But so I think I'll argue in this workshop, as I have in many, about flexibility, and at the end I'll also make the point that you should probably think about manageable number of assignments and types of assignments using media and forms that are appropriate. Some of you, say maybe from art or the sciences, are thinking about doing some things in a much different way because you are so reliant on physical spaces to teach your craft. Whereas maybe others, English is certainly a discipline, just looking at some folks on today, or social science, my disciplines. You can teach those online because a lot of times you're dealing with ideas or words on a page or things that can be managed via this virtual space. And so I think that's like my opening message with this conversation about assignments today, is to make things manageable given your situation, given your time, your commitments, all of us are going to be involved at one level or another, just in terms of thinking about personal safety, safety of our family, dealing with students who become ill. What if we become ill? We haven't really talked about those contingencies. So making things manageable for yourself, for your students is a key. Of course, I would say we shouldn't just turn our classes into total blow-offs just because of the situation. I actually think, we still have to maintain standards, but we have to think very carefully about what we can do given some of the limitations right now. So far, the technology has been holding up well, so I'm happy to report that. But things are happening quickly. I was in a board meeting the other night, emergency board meeting, and our campus passed basically one resolution in that board meeting, which is to give the president and the board powers to act quickly. As an example, with the Chromebooks, even though that was below our whatever the legal limit is on certain purchases without approval, there are things like that to give access to our students that we often will have to do in an emergency situation. But right at that moment, Governor Newsom basically shut down California and passed that order. So things are happening very quickly, but I am certainly hopeful that our technology will hold up in these times. Anytime during this workshop today, if you wish to ask a question, we'll have time for Q&A. You could always hold the space bar. It's like a walkie-talkie. Hold that down and then talk. The other thing is I am slowly I've been in faculty interviews. Someone just said here, I believe pass no pass can be transcribed up to a certain number of units. So that might be possible. I'll be curious to see how they're doing that, if they're turning a lot of their classes into pass no pass. But in any case, I've been in interviews the last couple of days, so I've been trying to just manage my time, as probably many of you are. I have about 3 of the videos that I created from previous trainings that I will put up on YouTube and put those on my website. And again, today, tomorrow, Monday, there'll be more trainings. So feel free to jump in. And if you want to watch one of these at a time when it's not being offered, just check out the video. And these are the trainings so far. So we've done the basics. I'll continue to offer that. Done Zoom and video, which kind of go together. Zoom being for offering synchronous video like we're doing today with your students. Video in general would be a lot of asynchronous applications within Canvas, using the Canvas rich content editor, uploader, and also the Canvas Studio, which is a really nice approach to create asynchronous videos that allow you to share the screen with your students, and also a little camera. You will notice there's... Yeah, go ahead, Brian. Is it Brian?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just curious, has the college talked about providing some sort of a cash for reimbursing people who have to get the Zoom $14.99 a month for their classes?
So what I will be doing, let me actually make a note of that, because I've been getting some emails trickling in. Just get a piece of paper here. And it could be, there are a couple scenarios there. CCC Confer had warned us that potentially there could be access issues in terms of the time to get your pro account, or maybe there are a limited number of licenses. Haven't heard. I know a few of you, including on this board, have been emailing me about that. I'm going to, today, I'll just email Michelle Risden, our VP, and ask about that, because I definitely would say yes. If you need that for your class, we either need to create, maybe there's an option for us to license more accounts if CCC Confer has run out because of demand, but almost certainly we would have to, pay for that. Again, I'm not in any authority position. My authority, exists virtually here on creating my PowerPoints, but I will certainly communicate to the administration, because I feel there was just a chain going around from one of the statewide faculty unions saying that if any faculty member needed, some of those technology requirements and we're not providing it, then we need to provide that. So let me put that on my list and see what we can find out, and then maybe...
Time would you suggest that I sign up for that anyways?
So what I would recommend is, I wouldn't pay for anything yet. I really wouldn't. Supposedly, again, as I've been suggesting in the trainings, if you send, and I'm still getting links back because I sent out multiple requests and I got my first one back and then I converted to Pro. I'm still getting those in my inbox, so it's suggesting to me that maybe they are still converting, but I think Solange and a few others online now had some issues with that. So it could be maybe they're just being slow. What I recommend is, if you get the confirmation from CCC Confer to change your account from basic to pro, click that. And again, there are two ways we can connect offline to check your profile to see if you have the pro account. If it doesn't do it immediately, which it did for me literally within 5 seconds, then I would almost wait 24 hours and see if maybe there's a delay. But let me offline connect with the instruction office and just tell them the concern. I'll also loop Treva in, our DE coordinator, to see if she's heard anything. So, yeah, go ahead, Michael.
This is Michael. I did it last night.
Yeah.
And like you said, it came back immediately.
Mm.
I don't know what that means exactly, but
okay.
I did click on the accept and all that stuff. Yeah.
Okay. So go ahead. So Betsy?
You checked mine and it came back immediately. Remember I sent you a picture of it?
Oh, yeah. So yours worked. Okay. Okay, so why don't we offline just, I will, continue to monitor that. And if any of you have specific issues, email me or Treva, and then we can just put you on a list and find out. But to answer Brian's question, I would argue personally that yes, we should definitely pay for that. But it could be the case that we just need to communicate with the support. There is a support email for CCC Confer, so we could also use that potentially in the future. So Brian, do you have the pro account yet or no? I don't know if Brian's still on. Okay.
No, I do not.
Okay. Well, yeah. Let's talk offline then, just to make sure. So, okay, yeah. So that's on my list. So in any case, today we're doing assignments and announcements in Canvas. We may bring in some gradebook conversations, but to be honest with you, gradebook is pretty complicated, and the gradebook within Canvas I think could be its own training, so we could see if that comes up in Q&A. Modules and pages I've run, I'll run that again. Discussions would be the text discussions versus any of the video stuff. Beyond that, we are doing one-on-one, so Betsy, a number of you have emailed me or Treva, and we're trying to work with you privately. And then we do also want to think about maybe having one-on-one or small groups of people. I think instruction may plan something on their end, training people via like departments or the instruction office. And then starting on Tuesday, every Tuesday going forward, unless we have a virtual student event, I'll cancel it, 12 to 1. So you can opt in. I sent out the invite yesterday. We'll get together via Zoom, and it'll be part, hey, how's it going in Canvas? Where do you need support? And it can also be emotional support. I mean, not to turn it into a therapy session, but I think in these times, having emotional support from our colleagues is important. So today we'll focus on the use of announcements, and I would call those the virtual post-it notes in Canvas, where you can send announcements to your students to communicate them with them in a number of ways, including telling them about changes that have happened in the class, telling them about things that are upcoming in terms of reminders and so forth. We'll also talk about assignments, and assignments are really the bread and butter of Canvas, because everything you do that is graded typically would fall under the category of assignments. And there are ways within Canvas to categorize your assignments into different subsections or categories, discussions, exams, and things of that nature. Keep in mind, as we've talked about in these trainings, that often in Canvas, when you operate with one group of content, that same group of content can be manipulated or altered in another section of Canvas. So we'll start with announcements, and announcements I feel will be a pretty quick conversation because there's not a lot to announcements. I will mention it to you that there is a setting in notifications that we can set under our profile, that our students can set, that ironically enough could make it hard for your students to see your announcements. That being said, there is a great deal of redundancy built into Canvas that if you have a due date of an assignment, if you announce that due date will also show up by default at the end of the syllabus, because Canvas will aggregate all of your assignments typically at the bottom of your syllabus. That assignment will show up if it's a discussion in discussions, in modules typically, as we're arguing for you to use modules to structure your class, and in other areas depending on if it's an exam or a quiz. So that level of redundancy, I will just say, in the past when there have been grade disputes with students, that generally holds up, because we argue if a student says, well, I didn't know where to find the assignment, we would say, well, it typically will show up, the due date will show up in 3, 4, 5 different places, including in the calendar. So, but announcements can be a very useful feature. These are some of my announcements I would have during a class. For example, at the beginning of a class, if you're doing any kind of, like in addiction studies or counseling, where you're going to be talking about sensitive topics, this conversation, or this announcement rather, on sensitive topics and conversations is very typical for a lot of my social science classes, because if we're talking about something with gender or race or sexual orientation or politics, pro-life, pro-choice debates, students can get very emotional. So I try to really put some undergirding in a class to say, hey, even though I want you to share opinions, it's very important that you respect others and that we're tolerant and we don't allow hate speech. So what I try to do is set up announcements that will basically connect or reinforce some of the things I'm saying in my syllabus or in my policies under my modules. So the announcement really is like a post-it note. You stick it on your class. In a sense, it appears, and then it is something that a student hopefully will read. There are some options even to allow students to reply and to, I believe, like announcements. I haven't really done that myself, but to just show you what announcements are, we'll go to one of my classes. Again, at this point, I think all should have received the shell from Trevor. We've been having conversations about building the shell out, and this is an opportunity today to at least think about how your announcements might be used in Canvas, and then what kind of assignments you could use for your students. I'm just realizing right now we have two cats, and one of the cats is crying outside the door. So, one of the things about doing Zoom is some of the distractions you're not used to at the office. You will start to get used to them. So, there are, by the way, if you're interested, there is a way through Zoom to set up a virtual backdrop. It's found under your profile settings, and that can be very useful. Some of us who were doing interviews yesterday had virtual backgrounds, because sometimes you're not in a place maybe that has the best neutral background. Again, I think for a class purpose, I think our students are pretty forgiving, and I don't think our students are going to say, oh, hey, I can see your clutter in the back of your office. But that is a nice option if you're interested in Zoom. So you can see right here, actually, under announcements, I have all my announcements listed here. And what you can do is you can go to New Announcement, the blue tab. And as you're used to right now with the Rich Content Editor in Canvas, you can actually, you're pretty familiar with this, right? If you want to do a video announcement, all you have to do is click on that tile that we're familiar with, hit Start Recording, and then that is immediately populated when you're done. It'll take a second. Canvas will upload that, and if it's a large announcement, which I don't know if you'd really want a half-an-hour announcement, but if it's a short couple-minute announcement, it might take a few minutes to process. It will then be saved as you've been used to. Just hit save, and that is saved for you. But like with every other area in Canvas, there's nothing new here. If you're in your modules, if you're in your syllabus, this looks the same. There's a title. This looks the same. You always have your files, your links, and your images. And as I've said before, images could include course images you've already uploaded. And those are carried with your Canvas class. If you use this Canvas class after spring quarter, if you're teaching in summer or fall. And by the way, I'm starting to think, we might be teaching a good part of next year online. I think that's a real good possibility. We don't know what's going to happen. But the good news is if you're teaching in summer or fall, the same class, you can save that. Basically, it's automatically saved. And then when you go to import content into your new class, you could suck that entire class in. It will bring along things like images, files, handouts, things of that nature. So that's kind of nice. Again, files would be readings. It could be documents. If some of you are doing group worksheets or something like that, you could have files available here. Anything you click on will always appear here. You could title that something else if you like. And then links would be, I didn't really go over this in previous workshops, but these are the equivalent of, say, hyperlinks on the internet or on Microsoft Explorer. We don't use Explorer, Canvas, a link to CNN.com. But these are more like intralinks. These are specific to your class. So anytime you want to link something in an announcement or wherever, if you're like, this is a good example. So I could do a generic announcement about class behavior, and I could say, hello class, I just want to remind you of, and then I could, type the message. And then right there, I could click my conduct code. I click that, and it is hyperlinked. This will take students within my class shell to wherever that exists. And in my case, it's a page. These would be all pages, I think. Let me scroll. Yeah, I don't think you could load more results. According to this, link to a new page. These then, it looks like, are only pages. And again, we're saying pages are content that is very useful chunks of content, but you never want to maybe have access to pages for your students because they are mixed up. There's no order to them. There's no context to them. If you use modules are the smartest way to tell students how to interact with your content. So I would almost see it like pages are, if you go to your spice cabinet in the kitchen right now and you have 20 spices, or if you don't do a lot of cooking, you have salt, pepper, and cumin or something like that, all those spices are available, and depending on the dish, if you're making a Moroccan dish, you pull your Moroccan spices. If you're making Indian, you pull out your garam masala and so forth. That's really what pages are in Canvas. They're building blocks. But without a recipe, without an organization of those, students could be really out in the cold. So this is a great example of using content and giving it a context or direction. Hi class, I want to remind you that there is a conduct code, and if any of you act inappropriately or say anything inappropriate, there are ramifications. So I could link to that, and then I have some options below here. Typically, this would be if you're doing multiple sections of a class, and I haven't had experiences with that. I always teach, if I teach 3 classes a term, DE, each of those is a different class. There may be some folks in languages or some other fields where they're somehow combining sections together. So I'm not really going to comment on this because I don't do that. So for me, when I hit save, it just goes to my class. I can choose an attachment. And that is basically the same thing as we're working with here. These are local files already imported into your Canvas class. These would be a new file. And then once those files get imported, those will get populated under files. So you could potentially then use that later because it will just get uploaded by Canvas. Because Canvas needs a way to have, it's like a hard drive, right? But it's in the cloud. So Canvas needs to store that file locally for you. Then I get to my options on announcements, and I could do a delay posting. So this is the exact same structure you're familiar with the calendar that you'll see in assignments. In assignments, there's a little additional layer of complexity because you have an option of opening and closing it at different times versus when that assignment is due, and we'll talk about that later. But if you click on calendar, as you know right now from your modules, you can click the date, you can put in the time, AM or PM, whatever you like, hit done. And when I save that, what that means is today is the 21st. This does not get posted. It doesn't get posted to the class feed of announcements until March 31st. And so what I sometimes will do is ahead of time, as you teach a class more often, you might have almost generic announcements. Like I might have the same announcement that I want for all my classes about my conduct code. And so it's kind of handy to save yourself a little bit of time, particularly for teaching the class in the future, to create a Word file. And I'll just pull up my Social 107. This is from my computer. And so this is a folder I have. It's a nice way to organize your classes. And then this way in the future, if I have preset discussion topics, right, that I like to use. Now, I will warn you, if you change stuff, don't forget, like if I take some readings out or I encountered. The last time I taught this race class this quarter was a year ago, last winter. And I had changed some readings. There were some video links that went dead as I was updating. So there is a lot of alteration. But you can have some of these established ahead of time. And that way, if you like particular announcements or type of announcements that clarify your policies, or if you're Michael and you're teaching a writing class, and every time you like a particular style in terms of your margins on your paper, in terms of the font size, the type of font, the paragraph style, whatever, you can always have that as a preset announcement to remind your students. Again, I would recommend to you that you reinforce that with other areas of content in your Canvas shell. Have that on the syllabus. My behavior policies in my class, and I would imagine, a counseling class, a class in social science where there's a lot of heated discussion, you probably don't want to say that once. If there's a concern about students getting in a fight or making inappropriate comments about political topics. Now, maybe you're teaching a class a math class. And maybe in a math class, there's very little debate. I mean, are students really going to get into a heated conversation about the quadratic equation? Probably not. The conversation there would probably be, how the heck do I solve this? I don't understand the steps I have to take. If there's a political content to your class, emotional content, upsetting, traumatic content in a counseling class or social science class, then I really argue for the reinforcement. If you're teaching a class that typically DE or face-to-face would not have a lot of argument, maybe you just need your policy on class behavior enforced or reinforced, or not even reinforced, just stated in one area. So I could delay posting. I could do a podcast feed, and I'm going to say on this is basically, I think, going to be set up in a graphic form like you'd see on a typical podcast. And I guess students can reply. I don't personally do this, so I'm not an expert on this approach. And the reason I don't do it is because I have a, quote, podcast feed and replies on my discussion board for my text discussions. And so I don't typically check those. I do click the liking just because it's an option, but I don't necessarily, I think it's a functionality from Facebook, and you can also do that in discussion posts as well. It's fine. I don't think liking should be something that I would, change a student's grade on, or I would never grade students based on how many people like a student's post or like my announcement or whatever. So I typically will just have the announcement. I will just do a delay posting if I'm setting all my announcements ahead of time, and then I hit save. And the minute you hit save, then it will populate, and it will then become, part of the feed of the class if and when it appears. And if I go to all my announcements, you'll see, and this is a sample shell. It's not live. But what you can see here is when I click on that announcements tab, and it's typically here. I'm trying to see if this is one of those that I believe you can hide this. So if I hide it, again, go back to your settings if you ever want to change what's on your class tabs, the blue links. When you hit save, yes. So what Canvas does for a number of the key features that it feels you would likely interact with, such as pages, it often will have them as disabled, but it will still appear for you. So you could still adjust your announcements. For a class like mine, I do like having announcements, so I will make that live again. Again, I drag that up and hit save. Anytime you want to change the order of things, just do that. You always have to hit save at the bottom, and then you'll notice on your tabs that order gets saved. So I go back to my announcements, and then I would click, if they're not all showing, I would click all these. I could actually start selecting things. I've actually done this in the past. I could show you an example. Let's see here. This is a good example. So when you bring a class forward, when you take a class from a previous quarter and bring that into your Canvas shell, if I've taught this last winter, I would typically import it. What would happen, though, is it'll pull in all my announcements unless I tell it in that import feature, don't bring announcements, just bring exams, discussions, and modules. I typically will say bring the whole class and adjust the dates for me. Not that it gets the dates right all the time. But this is an example. So when I was teaching this class last winter, I said, I'm offering a deviance class in the spring if you'd like to take it, etc. Well, what would happen is if I didn't adjust anything, and even if Canvas adjusted the dates, and let's say it posted on, and I think it's not coming up as anything because the class never went live. But if that just gets posted in the class, and I'm not offering deviance in the spring, which I'm not this quarter, then students would be quite confused. So there's a danger in just bringing things in without going back in and selecting and adjusting the content. So what I would want to do here is click that, and I would just hit the trash button, and it'll say, are you sure you want to delete that announcement? Yes, I am. And then it gets deleted and it'll update the list. Okay, so that's just important to know. And again, it's very easy to go in, and if there are things that are no longer applying to the class, like I have announcements sometimes. There was one announcement about, this is a good example. I'm very particular that when students post discussions, that they thread their replies. And I'll save that conversation to our discussions workshop coming up later this weekend. But I'm very particular about that. So I noticed, students weren't doing it. It was still happening in week 5, so I made the announcement. Whether or not the students read it, that's another matter. So I often will use it for something that's really pressing, like if students are not following directions, I'll try to re-emphasize that. That being said, as I'll tell you later, based on students' notifications and how they set up their preferences in their account, as we all do here in this tab under the global navigation menu, there is not a guarantee that they will be reading the announcements. There are some options as far as how you might view or what your homepage looks like. Some of you right now, of course, if you've taken the basic Canvas training, you're familiar with the fact that we can go to our settings and we can choose what the home button will do when I click on it. In my classes, it always goes to the syllabus. For you, it might go to modules. For others, it could be the course feed, which could include the calendar and your announcement feed. So it again is not a guarantee if you provide an announcement to your students that it will be read. There's no guarantee in any class content that students will see what you're trying to get them to see. Now, here's another side of Canvas, and you're familiar with this now. You can do an announcement here. You can also do it here. I sometimes wonder why that's the case. I don't quite understand why have it in two different menus. I don't know. But a lot of Canvas operates in this way where you can do things on one side of one menu and also another. So it's just another option. So I guess if you want to, you could click on announcements on the right tab menu, and then you could also click it here. So totally up to you. I think I'll open it to Q&A. I think that's mainly it. One other thing, let me mention then that issue that happens with announcements. I want to give this in the chat room, but I'm wondering if it's not. Aha, I think I just figured it out. Okay, yeah. I just figured that out. That might be good to know. I think it wouldn't let me cut and paste because I didn't have the Canvas option on chat going to the group. It was just on one individual because someone had messaged me privately. So I just put in the chat room, if you click on this particular link. This is actually really handy. I discovered this last night poking around for some materials, and I'll just show you that. So this is very handy. This is like the how-to for everything in Canvas. So again, I'll put this on my COVID-19, on my teaching and learning website. I will add that today. But go to the chat room. You can just save that if you want that link. So this is pretty handy. There's the student guide for Canvas. There's getting started. There's instructor guide. Click on instructor guide, and this is topically arranged. So you can click on announcements. You can click on assignments. It's alphabetical. And these are just the main settings of those particular functions. So if you click on announcements, it will have a bunch of subheadings. How do I use announcements in the index page? And it'll tell you just like a walkthrough. It's really good, and it gives you the graphical screenshots of this, so you don't really have to read a lot of text. It will tell you all the dynamics. If there's a lot of nuance to a feature, like right now as we go through assignments, quizzes in particular, there's a new quizzes that Canvas recently related to the sociology hire committees meeting today. So unfortunately, we'll have to stop probably 5 minutes before. So I'll go back to my shell. Let me see what's happening in chat here. Mute button is on. Sorry. Thank you. Sorry. What I was saying is, yeah, thanks. Mute button is on. So I've been having computer crashes ever since I updated to Catalina on my Mac, and typically it only does that if I am rendering a video file. So apologies. So let me just real quick just mention again. So if you use the Canvas guide, you can take advantage of any questions you have that go beyond kind of the general level of what we're covering in these workshops. So check out the Canvas guide for sure. A lot of useful information. Real quick, just like maybe 1 or 2 minutes, do you have any questions on announcements that you want to ask before we do assignments? Any announcement questions at all? I'm not sure how you will use announcements. I think for me, announcements are probably the actually some of the easiest content areas to work with in Canvas, just because there's not a lot to announcements. Yeah, go ahead. Sure.
I just don't know how to put announcement or modules on a front page, on a home page.
Sure. Okay, I could show you that. So what you would do typically is when you are first setting your class up, if you go to your, I'll just pull a a blank class here, so this doesn't have any content in it. What I would do is I would click on one of these on this navigation menu on the right side, and I would go to my course setup checklist, and I would choose the course homepage. And this is where I would choose then the activity stream, and that would include then announcements. I could choose my modules, I could choose assignments list or syllabus. So that is where you would do it. I would not recommend choosing pages front page, because that is going to, I mean, you could do that if that was your syllabus, if you set your front page as your syllabus. But you would do it in that area if that makes sense. So yeah, so maybe in the interest of time, okay, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So in the interest of time, let me jump to assignments and just see if we have any questions with this with assignments. So assignments, as you might guess, could be anything like quizzes, graded discussions, any online submission that could include a paper. Obviously, that is the content in your class that is going to have a grade to it. It's going to assess competency. We won't get into rubrics. We won't get into how your assignments might be connected to your outcomes, and you could certainly do that in Canvas. That's another level of complexity. The assignments page shows the students all the assignments that will be expected of them and how many points each assignment is worth. And this is what you might see in your Canvas page. Under due dates, let me just put this in the group chat right here. And this is a little more information about how to set, I'll just pull that up on the web page so you can see what that looks like. But this is information about the differentiation you'll see between how due dates are set and the available from and available until dates are set. My general rule on this is the following. The due date is the hard firm date when you want your paper, your quiz, your discussion to be due. So if you want it to be due today at 5 p.m., you set that to March 21st, 5 p.m. The available from is giving an opportunity for you to say, I don't want, or I want this assignment to show up, say, a week before it's due or 2 weeks before it's due. And the tricky thing is that depending on the type of assignment, if it's a discussion, that of course can also be set under the discussion area where you have those same options. The until date would be if you allowed late submissions. So if your due date was today, March 21st at 5 p.m., and you wanted to give allowances for students to be able to turn that assignment in 2 days later, and perhaps then you would go in and deduct some penalty for that, you could do the until. I find it a little confusing myself, and I'm the type of instructor where I don't really have allowances for late papers. If you want to do that, you may. But if you're concerned about that, this is a very detailed discussion of what that means and how to set that up. So I just put that in Canvas because it's a little more than we'll have time to talk about. Let me take you back to my Canvas shell, and we can look at some assignments. We won't cover all the assignments. Now, as you're used to right now in Canvas, you can create assignments from multiple places. If I click on the Assignments tab, I will see all the options as I'm familiar with. I'm going to delete, this is just a sample. I can create assignment groups. And so if I'm Michael and I want to do, this would actually be great like for an English class. If I'm Michael and I want to teach peer review, if I want to have groups of 4 students maybe work on a particular type of paper, I can actually do that by creating groups. I can also do that in discussion areas. I have a lot of options where I can create different types of assignments and then maybe assign people to those via groups. I could create an assignment type here also. So if I wanted to, I could call something a discussion or put that in a discussion group. And then when I get into my gradebook, which I'm not going to talk about today, when I click on grades, Canvas will take those groups over into grades, and then it's a good opportunity for students to see that they're maybe performing really great on their discussions, but they're not doing a good job on their quizzes or their papers. When I click on this option here, I can, again, a lot of this functionality will connect to what's happening in gradebook, which we're not covering. So I could choose percentages. I could do like almost pass, no pass. I could do letter grade, a GPA scale, which I could actually go in and adjust. So if you want an A to be something lower than 90%, you could set that up and actually create a grading scheme. Not the same as a rubric, it's more just the scheme of how a letter grade would be assigned based on the percentage achieved on that assignment. So a lot of options there. I could put in my points here. I could put in, as typical, the title of the assignment. I could put the description of it. I have all the possibilities to link to images and to files and so forth. I then get down to submission type, quite a few options here. So as an example, I could click online and then all these choices will be available. I could do a file upload, a media recording, a website. A text entry is very easy. That's just a box and students type in that box and then that is their assignment. If I'm teaching a class where I'm concerned about plagiarism, like an English class, I click on Enable Variscite Submissions, and this is an external tool that will compare student papers to a database. And that database will typically include papers or assignments, say, from LTCC that have already been submitted. And if I click on the Advanced Variscite settings, I can talk about whether or not I want quotes to be excluded, self-plagiarism, so if a student has written something themselves a previous quarter and that is in our online database, I can exclude that. And then do I store submissions in the institutional index? I would recommend keeping that clicked because we don't necessarily want students taking one English class and then submitting the same paper to the next English class. I can also choose, yeah, go ahead, Michael.
So, yeah, this is Michael. Can you only choose one of those choices, or could I choose text entry and file upload?
Looks like I can do multiple.
Okay.
Yeah,
you
so
have your choice.
Yep, it's a choice. So it's a default. So I believe if I hit, I won't do it, but if I hit save and publish on this assignment, I think then the student would see, and this would be kind of weird, right? Because if you had a media recording, the media recording wouldn't go through Variscite. But maybe on your end, you're like, well, I want you to submit something. And I'm assuming that if you record a video of yourself and submit that, you're not going to plagiarize, hopefully, in that video. But if you do a paper for that same assignment, then I would run it through Variscite. You can also do restrict file upload types. And this is a little tricky because you have to do the accepted extension. So you could hit doc. I wonder if doc would also cover docx. That would be my question. You could do txt. You just might want to look those up if you're not sure, like if it's a JPEG or a TIFF or something like that. If you're teaching art, you might have, although I don't know why you'd have to, because a TIFF and a JPEG would probably get you the same thing. A TIFF is bigger than a JPEG typically. But yeah, so this would restrict the type of files. But it does look like you can do multiple of those. And then if you do on paper, this one kind of confused me, but I think they mean it's on, a student would turn in a paper to you physically and you would just basically put the score in for that and it would go in the grade book. Of course, right now, unless a student sent you a PDF of something, typically you would probably ask either for a Word document, a PDF, or a text entry submission. And then again, you could go in there and decide if you want to run it through Variscite and so forth. So yeah, it looks like you could do all those checked.
Scott, I have a question.
Yeah, Brian.
What if the file is a grouping of them and I'm having them put together a zip file, say? Or what if the file is really big? And I was thinking I could have them use Google Drive or Dropbox. Is there something like this that they could use on here specifically?
So I believe if you click File Upload, I think the question would be the size of file. If you go to your settings for every class, it should say that you have 20 gigabytes of storage. I think that's the equivalent of, right, 20,000 megs would be 20 gigs. So I believe it will allow you in that assignment to upload large files. I don't have any indication it wouldn't let you do that. How big do you think the file might be? Yeah, you're going to have a lot of images in like a PDF or something like that?
Yeah, so I'm teaching my portfolio class.
Yeah.
And they're going to be submitting their final portfolio, which would have 15, 20 images, videos, it could be fairly large.
You know what? I bet, let me see here. I bet I can do a quick test on that. Let me go to live class and let me go to assignment. Let's see here. The only problem is, well, it's not going to let me upload with an exam. I bet right now under my files, if I uploaded a really big video file, it'll let me do it. I bet if I click this large video file, let's see, and I could just hit cancel. Yeah, I don't think it's going to restrict it. I think the only restriction for you would be is if you click that file restriction type. Because I'm thinking the 20 gigabytes, that's global for your class. We've had this conversation in the video workshop. I believe that's not going to be an issue. What I would say is if that were an issue, then you could easily go to Dropbox or Google Drive and choose that link. And of course, in Dropbox or Google Drive, you want to make sure that if there's a sharing option, that if they were sharing it with you, that you could actually indeed read the file. But to me, it looks like you could just allow file uploads. Yeah, go ahead.
Relative. Now, what if I wanted them, if they didn't know about Google Drive or Dropbox, and I wanted that to be part of the submission process as a way of mocking something?
So I'm thinking here, let's see, if we click website URL, I've actually never tried this. Let me hit save and publish on this. No, I don't care what it says. I'll just hit save and publish. Okay, so let's see here. If I go back to assignments, it says no content, so maybe it didn't like that I didn't actually say anything. Let's see if it'll allow me. Let's see. I'll go to student view. Let's see if I can access that particular assignment. And I just want to test it and see if when I click on external URL, what's going to come up there. Because I didn't define it. Submitting a website URL. Let me hit submit assignment. Okay, so I think what it would do, let me pull up my Google Drive, my shared, or Google Doc rather. Let me pull up that. Let's see. I'll just, this is my resource file, so let me see. And this I have the global setting of anyone with the link can view. So that should cover me. And then if I go back here, what happens here if I click that? Test, submit assignment. Okay, submission details. Let me go back. I'm going to exit student view, which is hidden here. There we go. Leave student view. And then I'm back as an instructor. I'll click on assignments. And let me click on that and see what it's showing on my end as an instructor. So I can go to SpeedGrader and view that. And it's there. I think you're fine. Yep. It's that file, the resources. So I think you're good. So what I would say is you could go create your assignment. And again, just be sure when you create that assignment, I would not restrict file submissions. We're not really worried about viruses or someone hacking our Canvas site, because students do have to have access, obviously, to join your class. So what I would recommend for you, if you want to use the website, you could do that. And as Michael was getting at, you could do both. So you could tell your students if you really want to use Google Drive or you want to use Dropbox because it's easier for you to create your portfolio and update it. Because Google Drive is nice if you have a document, right, to insert images and you can adjust where those images appear amongst the chunks of text. But I would click both then if you want. Just do not click restrict file upload types, because then you have to put in all the allowed one. Leave that unchecked, and then I think you should be fine on that. So
okay, I have a
yeah,
question.
go
for
ahead,
you.
Solange.
Up to assignment groups where it says papers.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you show me the options?
Yeah, so these options they shouldn't default in your blank class. They will be based on just what you name them. So I could type,
Okay.
recordings.
That's what I wanted to
Yeah.
know. Thank you.
Right. I could type recordings. If you're teaching a class and you have a video or audio upload, you could call those whatever you want. And then what should happen is on grades, we won't have time to cover grades, but on the grade book, it should then allow somewhere in here, maybe because I don't have this set up, but it should allow for students to see the grades based on those categories, right? So it would be just all the discussions would be one chunk of grades, and then another chunk could be your papers and so forth. But since I don't have the grade book set up, and students are not populated in this sandbox, it's not going to show that. I know we're getting real close on time, or I will have to jump off in about 4 minutes for our committee meeting, but I know I didn't cover nearly enough. It would be impossible to cover everything. One thing I want to suggest to you is if you want to create a multiple choice exam or quiz, don't get caught up on the fact that quizzes and exams are all under the same tab. I find it a little weird. I do exams, but it still goes under the quiz heading. Very complicated. This would take probably a couple hours for us to do this, because what happens when you create a quiz is you are doing the typical things, or an exam where you're setting up all the assignment details. All of this is the same like you would do with a paper. The difference is you're setting up questions. Questions will be created from banks of sample questions that can be randomized. They're fairly challenging to work with when you first get the hang of them, or try to get the hang of them. Basically, I would type in, and you have to do this almost manually. There is a way where sometimes you can import materials from publishers. That could be an offline conversation. But the questions would be then a series of multiple choice questions I've created, indicating a series of choices and one correct answer. It's actually pretty easy to add a new question. You have the option of whether that question will be multiple choice, true, false, fill in the blank, drop downs, matching, formula answer. It's very robust. You have the same content editor you've seen in the past, with the exception of if it's a type of question that's matching, multiple choice, you get all these answers here. And that's where you have to go in and choose the correct answer, typically at the top, and then all the dummy answers at the bottom. And it's pretty involved. But the good news is once you set those up for your class, all of your exam banks, your question banks will then be ported to the next class. You could also do alignment of outcomes. I don't do a lot of that. I'm not a great expert on aligning outcomes within Canvas, so I wouldn't be the best resource. Probably the Canvas pages would be the best there. So I realize we won't be able to cover a lot more of this, and because my computer crashed, we won't have time for Q&A. We can pick up some of this a little bit later in one of the future upcoming workshops. Again, what I'd say to you is try to make your assignments manageable, given the fact that a lot of students are going to be struggling as we might be struggling as well. Real quick, and say, let's take 2 minutes. Any questions or concerns about using assignments that you might have that we could just address real quick here?
Will there be a seminar on the quizzes and tests?
I haven't planned that, but you know what? I certainly could. I could offer one. Let me check. I'm doing workshops today, tomorrow, and Monday. I want to check with instruction because they're saying that they want to start doing some workshops. But I think if there's a demand for that, I could certainly add that, and maybe I could pull someone else on board who has also maybe worked with. I've done quizzes and exams in my classes, but I haven't done a lot of alignment of those quizzes, say, with learning outcomes. But so let's see. I will leave that open, and maybe we can add one, because if you want to do some multiple choice quizzes, that's a good option. It definitely will save you some time. Canvas will auto grade. There are errors I discovered with the final I just gave in my 107 class, that a bunch of students said, oh, this one question was incorrectly grading. And so when that happens, even though you're saving time because Canvas is auto grading, you have to often go in and fix stuff because sometimes you maybe had your answer key set up incorrectly. So hold that. We may have a workshop. I better get offline, unfortunately. I would love to stay on board. Again, later today, I will have another workshop. I think it's at 2 p.m., I think is the next one coming up. So if you want to participate in that, I would love to see you back again. And I will get offline here so that I can go catch my committee meeting. So thank you all. Sorry about the computer snafu. It happens. And
Thanks, Scott.
I'll be back in touch and see you maybe later today. Thanks, everyone.